In the depths of a crumbling tower that scraped the very clouds of the twilight sky, an ancient artifact stirred. The air was thick with dust, and silence reigned, broken only by the rhythmic tick-tock of the giant clock mechanism that was built into the tower's heart. Each cog and gear spun in perfect harmony, powered by some force beyond the comprehension of mere mortals. This was the home of the Timekeeper, an entity neither alive nor dead, neither human nor machine. A figure from ancient myth whose existence was whispered about in forbidden tomes and forgotten lore. The Timekeeper had one task: to guard the flow of time, ensuring that past, present, and future remained in balance. In the tower, nestled at the very edge of reality, time did not behave as it did elsewhere. Hours stretched into days, days into centuries. And yet, despite the slow passage of years, nothing truly aged within the walls of the tower. It was a world both frozen and fluid like time itself. Far from the tower, in the bustling city of Morn, a young woman named Aisla wandered the streets, eyes glinting with an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. Aisla had always been different. She could sense the world in ways others could not, hearing the hum of the stars in the night sky, feeling the whisper of time as it passed, brushing her skin like the wind. Orphaned at a young age, she had spent her formative years in the great libraries of Morn, losing herself in the labyrinth of books and manuscripts. It was there she had first stumbled upon the legend of the Timekeeper. Many dismissed it as a fairy tale, but Aisla knew better. There was something about the story that resonated with her on a deep, inexplicable level. A passage in an ancient text spoke of the Keeper's call, a mysterious force that reached out to those deemed worthy, drawing them to the tower when the balance of time was threatened. For years, Aisla had felt the pull. It was a soft, constant tug at the edge of her consciousness, guiding her in dreams toward a distant place she had never seen but felt intimately familiar with. One evening, as the twin moons of Morn cast an eerie glow over the city, the pull became too strong to ignore. Aisla packed her few belongings and set off toward the horizon, following the whispers of time itself. The journey was arduous, taking her across landscapes that seemed to shift and change with each passing day. As she traveled, she encountered strange anomalies. A field where flowers bloomed and withered in mere moments, a river that flowed backward for hours before resuming its normal course, a village where the people lived their lives in reverse, speaking backward and growing younger by the day. With every step, the boundaries of reality frayed a little more, until at last, after what felt like both weeks and mere seconds, she arrived at the base of the tower. It loomed before her, impossibly tall, its surface a strange amalgamation of stone and metal. The clock mechanism at its heart was visible even from the ground, its hands moving in strange, unpredictable patterns. Aisla felt a strange kinship with the place, as though she had been here before in some forgotten dream. At the entrance, a door stood ajar, welcoming her into the unknown. She stepped inside. The interior of the tower was an impossible labyrinth, a structure that defied logic. Corridors twisted in on themselves, rooms opened into one another in ways that made no sense. Stairs led upward, then downward, then upward again, spiraling off into nothingness. And everywhere, always, was the sound of the ticking clock. As Aisla explored, she began to notice strange artifacts scattered throughout the tower, remnants of lives and places from across time. A Roman legionary's helmet rested beside a futuristic data tablet. A Renaissance painting leaned against a wall next to a Victorian steam-powered contraption. Each object seemed out of place and yet exactly where it belonged. In one room, she found a large, intricately carved table with maps of cities that no longer existed and star charts of constellations she had never seen. There were notes scrawled in an ancient hand, diagrams of time fractures, theories on the nature of eternity. But it was in the deepest chamber of the tower that she found the Timekeeper. The room was massive, dominated by the central clock that rose high above her, its gears turning with a precision that was both mechanical and magical. And there, seated on a high-backed chair at the center of the room, was the figure she had been searching for. The Timekeeper wore a cloak that seemed to be woven from the very fabric of the universe, shimmering with galaxies and nebulae. His face was obscured by a mask, a blank, emotionless visage of smooth metal. "You've come," the timekeeper said, his voice a deep, resonant echo that seemed to come from all around her. "I felt the pull," Aisla replied, her voice steady despite the awe she felt. "I knew I had to be here." The timekeeper regarded her for a long moment before speaking again. "Time is in danger. There are fractures, breaks in the flow that threaten to unravel everything. And you are one of the few who can help mend it." Aisla frowned. "But I'm just me. I don't know anything about time or how to fix it." "You know more than you think," the timekeeper said. "Time has always called to you. You have felt its rhythms, understood its whispers. That is why you were drawn here." The timekeeper rose from his chair, moving with a fluid grace that belied his ancient appearance. He gestured toward the giant clock. "This is the heart of time. Keeps the balance, ensures that the past flows into the present and the present into the future. But something has disrupted the mechanism. Something from beyond time." Aisla stepped forward, her eyes drawn to the gears and cogs that spun within the clock. She could see now that there were cracks forming along the edges, fissures that seemed to pulse with a strange, dark energy. "What caused this?" she asked. The timekeeper hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "There is a force, an entity that exists outside of time. It seeks to control the flow, to bend it to its will. For eons it has been kept at bay. But now it has found a way in." Isla's heart raced. "What can I do?" The timekeeper turned to her, his gaze piercing even through the mask. "You must go to the fractures and repair them. Each fracture is a wound in the fabric of reality, and only someone attuned to time can heal it." Aisla swallowed hard, the weight of the task settling on her shoulders. "How do I do that?" The timekeeper reached into his cloak and pulled out a small, intricately designed device. It looked like a compass, but instead of pointing north, the needle spun erratically, guided by some unseen force. "This will lead you to the fractures," the timekeeper said, handing the device to her. "Once there, you must use your connection to time to repair the breach. It will not be easy, and the entity will try to stop you. But you must succeed, or all of reality will unravel." Aisla nodded, determination filling her. She had come this far, and she would not turn back now. "Where do I start?" she asked. The timekeeper gestured toward the door. "The first fracture is in the city of Morn." Isla's eyes widened. "But that's where I'm from." The timekeeper nodded. "Time is cyclical, always returning to the beginning. You must go back to where it all started." With that, Aisla turned and left the tower, the weight of her mission pressing heavily on her. The world was in danger, and only she could save it. But as she stepped out into the twilight, she couldn't shake the feeling that the journey had only just begun. As Aisla traveled back to Morn, the world around her grew increasingly unstable. Days turned into nights in the blink of an eye, and entire cities vanished only to reappear moments later. People walked backward through time, reliving their lives in reverse. It was as though reality itself was coming undone, unraveling like a thread pulled too tight. When she finally arrived in Morn, the city was a shadow of its former self. Buildings flickered in and out of existence, and the streets were filled with people who seemed frozen in time, trapped in moments that repeated over and over. The fracture was here. She could feel it. Using the device the timekeeper had given her, she followed the pull of the needle, winding through the broken streets until she reached the heart of the city, the great library where she had spent her childhood. It was there, in the center of the library, that she found the fracture. The air around it shimmered, like heat rising from the pavement on a hot day. The fracture itself was a tear in the fabric of reality, a jagged wound that pulsed with dark energy. Through it, Aisla could see glimpses of other times and places, worlds that had never existed, futures that had never come to pass. She stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. Wow, this story pulled me in right from the start. The concept of a timekeeper guarding the flow of time is so original, and I love how Isla's connection to time was built up throughout the narrative. The setting, especially the tower with all the anachronistic artifacts, felt so mysterious and vivid. I could almost hear the ticking clock. And the twist that the first fracture is in her own city, so poetic and cyclical. I'm super curious about the entity outside of time, too. Feels like this could easily expand into a series. Can't wait for part 2. This was incredible. The way you described the Timekeeper and the tower was almost cinematic. Like I could see every twisted corridor and hear the clock ticking in the background. Isla's journey had me hooked, especially when she started encountering the anomalies in the world, like the river flowing backward and the village moving in reverse. It really gave me that sense of the universe unraveling. And that moment when she found the fracture in the library where she grew up? Chills. The idea that time is cyclical, always returning to the beginning, is so deep. I'm dying to know more about the entity that exists outside of time. Is it some kind of god? A dark force? Can we take a moment to appreciate how the tower itself is basically a character in this story? The way it's described, with all the twisting staircases, relics from different time periods, and the ticking that's always in the background, really gives off this otherworldly vibe. It feels like a place that's completely outside normal reality. Isla's connection to the tower and her unique ability to sense time makes her feel like the perfect protagonist for a story like this. And the entity from beyond time? That's such a cool concept. I wonder what its motives are and how it managed to crack the flow of time in the first place. Definitely hoping for more lore and backstory on that. This has the potential to become a whole saga. This was a wild ride from start to finish. You've built such a rich, layered world here with time acting like both a friend and an enemy. Aisla is such a compelling protagonist. Her sense of duty, mixed with this almost mystical understanding of time, makes her journey so interesting. The Timekeeper feels so enigmatic, too. I couldn't help but think that maybe there's more to him, like he's hiding some bigger truth or secret. The cracks in time and the idea of different realities bleeding together. It's such a fresh take on the whole time travel genre. And that scene where Aisla finds the fracture in her old library? So emotional. I can already tell this story has the kind of depth that could unfold into something epic. I'll be keeping an eye out for the next chapter.